Okay, well, let's take a look at Chapter 9. We're going to talk about negotiating and networking. And I will start by saying that networking and negotiating are two things that people typically do poorly. And to begin with networking, the premise that most people go into networking with is that I'm going to go in there and I'm going to go to this meeting and I'm going to walk out, I'm going to have this great deal that's going to pop out of this meeting. Could happen, not likely. What is more likely is you will get an opportunity by attending a bunch of meetings on a regular basis. If you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and executives, what you'll find is that they become part of communities. And once you become a member of that community, then the community gives back once you've contributed to the community. That's the way I would look at networking, as more of a long-term thing, not as a bunch of quick hits. If you go in there and run around the room handing out your business card and telling everyone what you want from them, most of them are going to throw the card away. They're going to say, feel like they're being used. So the idea of networking is to become part of a group, become part of some sort of community, whether it's a professional association, a chamber of commerce, a local social club like a Kiwanis or a Moose's or an Elks or something like that. The purpose of these things is to be around people, be within proximity of people who have similar likes or needs that you have, or similar skills that you have, so that you can either build skills by being around them and just sort of tacitly picking up knowledge, or that you're going to find opportunities by being around them and they're going to remember you when an opportunity comes along. Right? So the idea of going in there and pitching and getting someone to give you something at one of these meetings doesn't happen as much as when you become part of the community and people say, oh, I remember this guy and he does this, or he's really good at that. Then they remember you when they bump into an opportunity. And likewise, you should be remembering other people in that community when you see an opportunity that might fit them. Once you start having this sort of give and take relationship, all boats sort of rise. So do not make it about you. Make it about the community. So also, if we look at this here, they talk about primary and secondary connections. Now, there is, if we look at, this is from, works from Grenovenor, who is he's a researcher and professor at Stony Brook University in Long Island. He wrote about this for decades, back into the 80s, where he talked about loose ties. And the concept is that this circle of friends that we have here, the strength of these relationships, the number of times you communicate them means that they've got these thick lines, right? And the thicker the line, the more often you communicate with them. So you talk to these people a lot. These people are in the same sort of group or community that you're in. They probably know everything that you know. These are your best friends, let's say. They know everything you know everything they know. Where your opportunities really come from are from your loose ties, because you can have a lot more loose ties than you can have these close ties. And in these loose ties, you might have met someone and several times at a networking event like the Chamber of Commerce holds, or at a professional association that you go to and attend conferences, and you've met this person several times at conferences, and they remembered you when they ran across something. There's a lot more of those people than there are of these people. And they're a lot more likely to run into things because they got networks and loose ties out here too, beyond what they themselves got. So that's where a lot of your opportunities come from, your loose ties, not your close ties. All right? So these secondary level or tertiary level connections that you might have. Okay. So you should have objectives in what you're trying to do in networking, but it shouldn't be a hard sell. Right? It shouldn't be walking into the room and saying, hi, I'm looking for a job. That's not going to work, right? If you walk into the room and you start meeting people and they start asking you what what you're into, even if you're unemployed, you can say, yeah, I'm maybe I'm currently looking for an opportunity, but what I've been doing my entire career is this. But you're not trying to hard sell them, right? You're making them aware that you're out there and that this might be your intent. If you go into a hard pitch mode, they will shut you down and move on. It can also help you perform better at your current job, because if you're around people who are doing what you're doing, who may have different takes on what you're doing, who may help you build skills or be a resource for you when you need something done, that can be a tremendous thing. And it can help you advance your career and provide you an opportunity to be mobile if something comes along. All right. So perform an assessment on yourself and understand what skills you have. This 1 minute sell, I think, is really not a hard sell, but sort of like, I've been in the technology industry for 30 years and mostly worked in marketing communications, and a lot of stuff both in the US and Latin America, and you sort of talk a little bit about what you've been doing so that people have a broad sense of where you might fit in something. If they have questions, they'll ask. Which is great because that leads to a conversation, and the more conversations you have, the more opportunities that generally provide themselves. And these networking interviews, now I would be careful in how this is framed. I don't necessarily like the way the book framed some of this. In my mind, if you are looking for a job, sometimes you can have a networking interview where you ask someone if they know someone in the field. And this is not that this person has a job for you, but this person might be able to give you some direction or some insight on something. So you arrange for a phone call, you arrange for a meeting better than phone call, by the way. Meet them for coffee or meet them for lunch or even meet them in their office, but you're asking them just to give you some insight. Look, I'm trying to work my way through this. This is where I'm looking for a job, and I was wondering if you can give me some insights to how this might work, right? They may have a job, in which case they'll tell you. Odds are they won't, in which case you can try to see what you can develop from them, all right? Okay, set the objectives. I would say break it down. Make sure to ask a lot of questions, have questions prepared for you before you go in, but kind of roll with the conversation. Questions might be more of to sort of prompt. If you hit a lull in the conversation, you could ask a question. Be concise and clear, and don't be and make sure that you thank them for their time, and make sure that you sort of give them a thank you note at the end of this whole thing. Okay. So we've kind of went through that. I would say that you're looking to develop these, and social media can be very helpful. We particularly say that, understand that there's differences, and I'm sure you do, between LinkedIn and Facebook, or LinkedIn and Instagram, or LinkedIn and TikTok. There's certain professional things that you might put up on LinkedIn that you're doing to make people aware of changes, like you've just changed jobs, or you've just got promoted, or you've got some new responsibilities, so that they know where to think about you. And Facebook is where let your friends know you went on vacation, or Instagram is where your friends know you went on vacation. Okay, negotiating is another thing. I would suggest strongly that most professionals can do better at this than what they do. One of the best books is decades old, but it's still one of the best books. It's called Getting to Yes. It was written by the guy who negotiated the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt with Jimmy Carter at Camp David, the Camp David Accords. And I recommended that to a lot of people, and most of them have come back and told me what a great resource it was. So, short book, and it gives you a lot of information as to what you can do to understand how to really do networking. Do negotiating, and everybody negotiates everything from a job application to where, to a salary increase to where your family's going on vacation. And understand that most things are negotiable, even when they say they're not. Very often they are. So but understand what you're giving, what happens when you negotiate. There's a give and take in this relationship, and if you're pushing too hard on something, sometimes it may not be worth it. So plan what you're intending to do, understand what types of bargains you might want to be able to make, understand what the best alternative bargains are. You may want one thing, there may only be, that may not be on the table, right? But maybe there are some alternatives that you can negotiate that would be good, better than what you got, right? So understand that, and understand when it's time to make an agreement and when it's not. Part of this is you do the research up front. If you're selling a house or a car, you go up front and you go to Zillow and you find out what the house prices are. Understand what the market is, not what someone thinks their house is worth or wants for their house. I've had, I recently was working with someone who was negotiating buying a restaurant in New York City, and the owner of the restaurant said, I think the number was $250,000 for this restaurant. And the reality is the place wasn't worth more than $50,000. And when asked why she wanted $250,000, well, that's what I've put into the restaurant over the years, and I need that for my retirement. Well, what you need for your retirement and what the market is willing to support are two different things, right? So understand, do your research before you go in and just accept a number. Set goals, and this is where you have your alternatives. This is what I want. This is what the alternative might be that I can actually get. So set those, okay? Anticipate what they're going to do. You make a comment, you make a statement, and they say, I don't know. Or they say no. Or they give a different response than what you expected. Try to anticipate what they're going to say so you're not sitting there dumbfounded. People oftentimes say, I'm going to say this, right? Okay, but they don't think about what the other person might say. And what if they could say this, or they could say this, or they could say this, right? So they're not always going to say just what you want them to say. So understand what can happen, what objections they might have, and how you might address those objections. And try not to deal with emotion. Try to deal with facts, right? Try to deal with, this is the reality of the situation. I know this is how this might feel, but the reality is this. I know you love this car, but the reality is it's got 300,000 miles on it, right? And you may feel really attached to it, but, or I know you grew up in this, you raised your children in this house, but the reality is it's not worth what you think it's worth, right? So, and then develop some trade-offs that you're willing to live with, all right? Developing rapport is good. Ask a lot of questions. I would ask questions before there's even an offer. Understand what it is that these people are trying to do. I bought a boat recently for less than, no, not that recently, several years ago, for less than a half of what the guy was asking for it, because I understood what the market was. And I also understood after talking to him that he really wanted to get rid of this boat badly because he lived far away from where the marina was. He couldn't get there very often and was just paying a lot of money to maintain it. So I realized I don't have to offer him that much because I'm going to save him money anyway. And by the way, he was sitting on it for months and it was not selling. So when you ask those questions, you may have a better understanding of what your real alternatives are here, right? Don't move too fast. A novice negotiator goes in and, opens the meeting and says, this is what I'm offering. No, wait, understand. Now, I'm not saying that they have to go first. And this is where I disagree. Sometimes it's good to let them go first. And for many novices, it's good to let the other person go first so you can see where they are. But they're going to anchor on that position, good or bad. So if you think they may come in high, they're going to anchor on that. It's going to be hard for them to come down necessarily from that spot that they've anchored on. So understand when it's appropriate for you to go first and when it's appropriate to let them go first. Try not to move too fast. Take your time. It's usually the people who are getting nervous that end up losing the deals. So slow and steady usually wins the race here. Okay. To postpone or not to postpone. Sometimes it makes sense just to put a hold on something. And you've got to understand what's going to happen if you do put a hold on it. In some cases, you may feel like, I can put a hold on this, and if this comes along, great. If this is the opportunity for me, great. But you know what? There's other opportunities sitting out there that might be better for me. So I think maybe what I might do is just slow down and think about this a little bit. Don't create a sense of urgency unless there is, right? If you start trying to push people and say, you got to do this today, and they say no, well, guess what? If they come back 2 weeks from now and you're still sitting there, they've got a better negotiating position. Know when to pressure and when to let go. One negotiating class I took said you should care, but not that much. If it's great, I would like to do business with you, but if you're not going to do business with me, fine, I'll go on to the next guy. Right? So you care, but not that much. Not everyone agrees on the terms. There's no agreement can be made. Learn from your mistakes. Maintain your enthusiasm. Maintain your optimism. Come back another day. So it's hard sometimes, especially if you've heard no a lot. But I think maintaining your optimism is important. If you start losing your optimism, you start becoming desperate. Very often you make bad deals. When you're negotiating around the world, there is a different sense culturally, and you can go to and take a look at stuff from, say, Aaron Myers from INSEAD. You can take a look at Gerrit Hofstede's stuff from University of Maastricht in the Netherlands. You can take a look at some of the more classic things like high context and low context cultures. But understand that different parts of the world negotiate very differently, and be aware of those differences, and how you should deal with them. Some cultures like a good argument, right? They just live for the argument. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily, getting angry or mean. They just love to have the give and take. Other cultures are obsessed with being civil and polite to each other. Even when they're sticking a shiv in, right? Some don't mind conflict. Others like things to take a long time. Some like things done quickly. So some people might, if you have a concession, some cultures might view as weakness. I would say that you have to understand the person that you're dealing with, and what it would be like with them. And I think you see classic signs of this, particularly when Americans start negotiating with Middle Easterners, or Americans start negotiating with Far Eastern people. They have a very different way of negotiating, and what they think is right and wrong in the negotiating process. So be aware of that, and research and understand the culture that you're dealing with. Okay. Let's see if there's anything I think that's a lot of what I wanted to do there. I think that's just about all of it. So we'll see you in the next video.